Every single person in MAGA world is complicit in Donald Trump's cover-up of the Epstein files. Every single one of them. No matter how close or how far you are to this administration, you are complicit. And some people are really complicit, and they don't like to acknowledge that. And that's exactly what we saw from Jay. Dance tonight as a video exposed his connection to Epstein, which was previously not acknowledged. And now he is freaking out with an insane post on Twitter we're going to get into. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button, because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we get into the video that made J.D. Vance freak out, and of course that freak out from Vance, I want to start with the latest update of someone who is not afraid to call out the Epstein files, as J.D. Vance has kind of disappeared lately. But that's Jasmine Crockett right here.
Department of Justice didn't have this information, and if they didn't have this information, do we know whether or not they actually deleted this information? Do we know that there was a thorough investigation? Do we know whether or not the investigation had concluded? These are all questions that we need answers to, but we can't get them when you're not cooperating. So we don't know what the DOJ has, nor what it is that the DOJ potentially was trying to do. Considering that the president right now is trying to obstruct on some very basics of let's just get a subpoena that says release all the information, I wouldn't be surprised, just like he obstructed the prosecution of one of his henchmen who took $50,000 in taxpayer dollars from undercover officers. I wouldn't be surprised if he sent a message and said, stop investigating, we're done with this, Epstein's dead, I don't want to hear anything else about it.
Do you have any evidence of that claim?
I have no idea. No, that's the whole point. I have no information, and that's why we need these files to be released, because we are looking for transparency, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. Listen, if people decide that they want to continue to support a person who may be a pedophile himself, or a person who obviously is covering for pedophiles, that's on them, but they should know at least the devil that they have decided to pick.
There have been few Democrats more vocal than Jasmine Crockett in calling out this Epstein cover-up, and it comes at a time as Donald Trump has been radio silent. Sure, he had his press conference today in which he announced he'd be working more than anyone else to protect vulnerable children, which just feels like kind of the most blatant oversight I've seen from the White House's messaging in a long time, which is saying something. But where has J.D. Vance been? I haven't heard anything. He's often on Twitter, and we haven't seen those tweets from Vance. It's almost like he's very purposefully quiet, because we know there is an Epstein connection with J.D. Vance. We know it, but no one's talked about it enough, right? Well, now J.D. Vance is bringing attention to that Epstein connection. And part of it was revealed in a video posted today from Lawrence O'Donnell that had J.D. Vance so upset he responded to it with a tweet. I want to check out the video from Lawrence, the post from J.D. Vance, and then dive deeper into his Epstein connection.
Gerald Ford said nothing about Richard Nixon as Nixon sank deeper into scandal, as Nixon, on his way to impeachment, which he only avoided by resigning the presidency, Gerald Ford said nothing because Gerald Ford knew that when he eventually took over the presidency, he didn't want the stain of Nixon on him. And so J.D. Vance is silent tonight. But what is J.D. Vance supposed to say tonight when he reads an email written by Jeffrey Epstein during the Trump presidency in 2019? 6 months before Jeffrey Epstein's second arrest, saying, quote, of course he knew about the girls, meaning Donald Trump. Donald Trump has always denied any involvement in or knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking and raping of children. And the Washington Post is reporting that one of Jeffrey Epstein's emails says Donald Trump never got a massage. Donald Trump wasn't involved, according to this email. The email written by Jeffrey Epstein says, Trump knew of it and came to my house many times during that period. Epstein wrote in an email to himself on February 1st, 2019, the Washington Post is reporting, several months before he was arrested on trafficking charges and killed himself in jail, he never got a massage. So there's Jeffrey Epstein himself letting Donald Trump off the hook on that point. But Donald Trump's always insisted he never knew anything that Jeffrey Epstein was up to. Never knew anything possibly illegal that Jeffrey Epstein was up to. What is J.D. Vance or Donald Trump or any Trump defender supposed to say tonight When they read an email from Jeffrey Epstein after the first criminal investigation of Jeffrey Epstein in Florida, which led to Jeffrey Epstein pleading guilty, and Jeffrey Epstein writes an email to his criminal co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell in 2011 saying, quote, "I want you to realize that that dog that hasn't barked is Trump."
J.D. Vance responded to that video, that post of Lawrence O'Donnell writing on Twitter, "I did 2 media interviews literally today, one of which is airing in a few hours."
A little defensive there, JD, huh? A little defensive? Kind of jumping at the opportunity to try to clear his name. And why is that? Well, one, because I think overwhelmingly, in overwhelming numbers, we will see Republican members of Congress, and this is a shocker, but I really do think this is going to be the case, vote to release the Epstein files. And I think the same thing is going to happen in the House as it does the Senate. So where does that put J.D. Vance? It puts him in a tough spot because that's going to be his 2028 Republican primary competition. And we know that's all J.D. Vance thinks about is his political future. So J.D. can't come out and talk about the Epstein files, maybe in the way that he'd like to, but he also can't be seen as being on Donald Trump's bad side because that's whose endorsement he really needs in 2028. Of course, if Trump doesn't decide he wants to run again, illegally mind you, but Vance really, maybe more than anyone else, needs to distance himself from this Epstein connection because someone who spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein built J.D. Vance's political career. I'm talking about Peter Thiel. I want to dive into this all 30 million. Wow. Huh. It's up to 30 million now. I didn't know that it was 30 million illegal immigrants because last time Donald Trump said it was 20 million, and then it was 25 million, then it was 30 million. So apparently we've seen 10 million illegal immigrants come in during Donald Trump's administration because the number is up to 30 now, but it was never that by the time that J.D. Vance is running for president in 2028. When he's still talking about Joe Biden, for some reason the number will be 60 probably. But that's not the reason you can't afford a house. It is because we have allowed giant asset managers to buy up single-family homes in mass to keep the American working-class lifelong renters and Donald Trump's proposed 50-year mortgage. How is that even any different? Sure, you're not renting from a landlord, but the bank owns your home. And if you're paying them for 50 years, you're just paying rent to a bank and paying more interest than really is even imaginable. Double the value of your home when you bought it. That is J.D. Vance's solution along with Donald Trump. But first, and part of that solution is to blame the immigrants. Got to blame the immigrants, not the billionaires, not Epstein, who Vance needs some distance from clearly, but it's going to be very difficult, especially with survivors continuing to talk.
A lot of young people are saying housing is way too expensive. Why is that? Because we flooded the country with 30 million illegal immigrants who were taking houses that ought by right go to American citizens. And at the same time, we weren't building enough new houses to begin with, even for the...
Now, this really comes as no surprise to anyone. All of these billionaire elites are intermixed and intermingled and all talking and hanging out and being gross and weird and buying boats and throwing gaudy, ugly weddings. But that's the case. That's true. Which is why, to me, it is so funny that this Republican Party that rails against the elites, this faux populism act that they put on, the J.D. Vance certainly puts on the Silicon Valley venture capitalist. The guy with a best-selling book that was turned into a movie by Steven Spielberg, the Yale law grad bought and paid for by a billionaire who made his money in surveillance tech. That guy J.D. Vance, so outside the system. Okay, but it's so funny to me that these faux populists say we have to take down the elites, and they're destroying America, and we are at the same time as they write giant tax cuts for billionaires. They're saying the wealthy elites have concentrated power in Hollywood and New York City, San Francisco, Chicago, destroying our country, and we have to rail against the elites. And they assert that there is of course, the elite pedophile cabal that, of course, Hillary Clinton is running out of a pizza shop at the same time as they ignore that Donald Trump actually was a part of the billionaire pedophile cabal. And believing that that group exists, which clearly it does. Jeffrey Epstein is the easiest example of that. Clearly that group exists. And to those billionaire pedophiles, MAGA says, here's a little tax cut. Not a little tax cut, the biggest tax cut in history. They rail against the wealthy elites to bail them out with billions of more dollars. It doesn't really track to me. Their economic populism doesn't really track to me. And the way that Vance wants to present the us versus them instead of the tech oligarchs who made his political career and sustain his political career and will try to advance his political career instead of railing against them. Who does J.D. Vance pick as his biggest political enemy? Listen to this clip.
Survivors have been very clear and consistent about our messaging that anyone who performs harm or anybody that has done any wrongdoing or has harmed people should face accountability. They should be brought to justice. And I think that survivors are holding strong to that sentiment. And I think that the only way we're ever going to be able to do that is by releasing all of the files from the...
Jenny Vance can try to run all he wants. It is not going to work. You are complicit in this. He's going to try to separate himself from this scandal. Not going to happen. And we're going to have to continue to call him out. We're going to on this show. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you